Welcome to Wocult's podcast. My guest today is Anna Driesmans. Anna is a regenerative leadership practitioner. She helps leaders and organizations move beyond the usual transformation playbook and instead treat their organizations as living systems, places that either drain the people inside them or bring them to life. What makes Anna rare is the blend strategy and structure on one side, and deep human work, trauma informed, nervous system aware on the other hand. Anna, welcome to Wocult and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Divya, for the beautiful introduction, and thank you also for inviting me. I'm really impressed with the work you are doing to create meaningful cultures, and I'm really glad to be part of it.
Thank you, Anna. I'm really keenly looking forward to a candid conversation with you today.
Likewise.
Okay, so Anna, to begin with, at Wocult, we ranked the top 20 human pressures on corporate life, and it's not surprising to know that almost none of it was workload.
True.
What sat at the very top was human, it's poor people leadership and the cultures it breeds. So, Anna, you work with organizations as living systems, and I don't want to start with behavior with you. Instead, I want to start with what toxicity actually is. So, my first question to you is toxic might be the most overused word at work, but you see organizations as living systems. So, just cut through the noise for us, Anna. What actually makes a workplace toxic, and which form of it precisely does the most damage to the working professionals?
All right. Thank you for mentioning the word toxicity in itself, Divya, because in Europe we call these environments abusive environments because of the abusive behaviors. But what I call a toxic culture is one where there is no psychological safety. And that's another word that's often used, right? Toxic is, if you look at it from a living system perspective, it's an organization where the conditions are not met for people to flourish. Yeah. Just as any other living system, just as a tree in nature, if it doesn't have sun, if it doesn't have water, if it doesn't have enough light, it will not be able to grow. And we see the same thing happening in toxic cultures. It's environments where the conditions are not met for people to be authentically themselves, to grow, to explore and innovate, to speak up. When those environments are there, I call it toxic. So you notice often a toxic environment by looking at the people and the state that they are in. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for that candid response. And I do have a follow up question on psychological safety, but later in this podcast.
All right.
Okay, my next question is you work with the nervous systems day in and day out. So long before anyone says the words, this place is toxic, the human body already knows. What
True.
does toxicity feel like in a person or in a
Yeah.
room before we have a language for it?
Yes. Um, well, there's a lot of things that happen in the body when we are in a space that is unsafe. And that is because biologically, we have a system which is called the vagus nerve, which is the biggest nerve of the autonomous nervous system that is detecting safety or unsafety. So biologically, we will go into what we call a sympathetic state, which is a state of fight or flight. And when we are in that state, there's a lot of things happening in the body. So everything that is autonomous, that is unconsciously in our bodies, will be impaired. For instance, our breathing. We don't think about breath, we breathe unconsciously. But when we are in that sympathetic state, because we're in a toxic culture, that's when the breathing will be impaired. Our immune system will be damaged. We will be a lot less resistant to illness, for instance. Also, our metabolic system changes. So what people notice often is tension in their bodies and more in the upper body than in the lower body. that will lead to headaches, that will lead to mental confusion, that might lead to sleep deprivation over time, because the energy is much more in the brain and not so much in the body. And that's what's hard on people, because when we are in that sympathetic state, we are more disconnected from the body, because our biology is done in such a way that we need to fight or flight, but that should only take 2 minutes. However, in a toxic environment, the stress is continuous and long over time. So we stay in that state for days, for months, and then we get really ill. And that's why people only notice it after a while, which is a pity. Because if we notice it sooner, we can regulate sooner as well. Yeah. But there's a lot of things happening in the body. And obviously, over time, you will have the typical burnouts, you will have the typical fatigue, that the system is really drained. So being aware of what happens in the body is really important for me.
Absolutely. How rightly described. Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna, for a sharp answer.
Thank you,
Okay,
Divya.
so my next question is, your work is about moving from extractive to regenerative organizations. So just be blunt with us. Feel absolutely free to be blunt with us. Is a toxic culture a breakdown of the system, or is it what a company built to extract maximum output from their people?
Yes. For me, it's definitely a breakdown of the system. Um, I have worked in some very productive environments where there was no toxic culture.
How
Yes.
wonderful.
Because if we are operating in a healthy environment, then automatically we are performing. And that may seem strange, yeah. But when we feel safe, we are open to explore, we innovate, we are willing to find new customers because that's exciting. Yeah. And for me, a system that is toxic does not allow all these things. So over time, and that's what I tell my clients, if you don't deal with the toxicity, your performance will go down for sure. Yeah. Often it takes one person to damage an entire culture. And in the same way, you only need one person to transform a toxic culture into a healthy one. Because for me, an organization or a structure is a group of people. And if there is one emotionally immature person in that structure, in that organization, then a healthy culture can become toxic very fast. Yeah. I had one person in my team a couple of years ago, and we had a really strong, healthy team. It was a fun team. We were always working together. We were enjoying each other's company. We were often staying late, but we were taking care of each other. It was safe. It felt exhilarating. And I was asked to take on a person of a different department, which I didn't really like. But then again, I went for it. And it took about 6 or 7 weeks for me to see that people in my team were fighting against each other, which did not take place before. And this is what one person can do. An emotionally immature person who has an intention to undermine the system for their own benefit can create toxicity really fast. So we have to be really aware of that as leaders. Yeah, we have to be really clear on what kind of behaviors we tolerate and what kind of behaviors we don't tolerate, because it can go really fast. Yeah.
Absolutely. How wonderfully described. Thank you so much. And there are people who actually, shy away from having these conversations because
Mhm.
sometimes certain high performers can be really jerks who actually,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah,
deteriorate the
true.
entire culture of the organization, taking the
Mhm.
others also down along with them. And
Yeah,
just because of the pressure to have them continue in the system, organizations do not take any action against them. So, thank
exactly.
you for bringing these things to light.
Mhm. You're welcome.
Okay, my next question is, our research puts poor leadership at the very top of what wears people down.
Mhm.
But you have trauma informed leading philosophy that is,
Mhm.
hurt people, hurt other
Mhm.
people.
Exactly.
When you meet a toxic leader,
Mhm.
what do you infer from them? Do you think a frightened system turns a decent person into a toxic person?
That's a really interesting question, Divya. I think we are all influenced by our environment. So if I'm a healthy person and I walk into a toxic culture, through the nervous system, I'm already taking tension into my body and it will change my behaviors over time. However, if there's a strong leadership in that organization where there's a clear agreement on what we accept, what we reward, what we don't accept, what are our non negotiables, as I call them, then that toxicity cannot expand. Yeah? Because there is a clear understanding and ownership of the culture. However, if that person is part of the executive team, which often happens, because the higher you go, the more there is space to be toxic, yeah, then I have a different approach. What I do often is I will not call out the behavior in the person because they have a huge influence also with the top. But what I will do is I will empower those people suffering from that one toxic or two toxic leaders. I will empower them first to speak up. I will provide an alternative narrative that says, you're actually right. What you're feeling is really what we should not do. And when all of a sudden those people are becoming empowered, they will get in touch with leadership. They will talk to the external instances responsible for well being. Yes. And I create a community of empowered people that automatically exposes the behavior of that one or two individuals. And then the next step is often that the organization as a whole realizes, okay, there is a problem here that I have to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's a different approach because what I've learned is to trust that toxic behavior will expose itself. I don't have to, how shall I say it, let a person go immediately if he's toxic.
Yeah.
I will make him aware of the behavior. And if he doesn't want to change, I will empower the organization as a whole to deal with it. Because then the culture afterwards will be much stronger. Otherwise, it's me against the bad person, you know? And who am I? I am not God. Yeah. I just want to create a safe culture where people can thrive and feel safe. And by doing it like that, the culture grows at the same time that I'm dealing with the toxic behavior. And that's the good part of it, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Spot on, actually.
Thank you.
That's the best way to actually deal with the, organizational toxicity. And as you rightly said, sometimes, people at the top are toxic and there's little
Mhm.
the organization can do about them. But I think that's the bravery and courage that is
Yeah.
required to take the right decision at the right moment
Mhm.
before it's too late for other people.
Yes. And there's always an organization above because I used to work for a CEO of a company who was very toxic. I
Okay.
wasn't hired by him, but I was hired by another person of another unit. I actually went as high as up to the board to really make a detailed analysis on the culture. And that led to them making a different choice. And that led
Wow.
to them also building a culture that they are now protecting. So it can be much wider than just a steering committee.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
How wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I do also have stories actually going up to the top.
Yeah. You have
Okay.
to, right?
Yes. Okay. All right. My next question is almost every company now says the phrase psychological safety. Now, this is where things
Hmm.
get real. Far fewer people inside the organizations actually feel that psychological safety. So, why
Hmm.
do you think there is a difference in what organizations say they do and what people
Hmm.
feel? And what are
Yeah.
the leaders mistaking for when they
Yeah.
understand psychological safety as a concept?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's linked to the fact that organizations often operate from a rational state of mind, so from a mental body, whereas psychological safety is an embodied experience. It is something that is felt. Um, so, therefore, as a cognitive concept, organizations need to actually do something with that for it to become real. Yeah. And what I usually do is to make that distinction between the mental concept and the embodied experience is I create a safe space where leaders can experience what safety is. For instance, I do a lot of talking circles. So a talking circle is a space in a circle where people sit all on the same level, where there's no hierarchy, and where there's a talking stick that simply says, if you hold the stick, you're talking and nobody else interrupts. That's the only rule. People who don't want to talk, they don't take the stick. Yeah, they can just be silent, listen. So that in itself creates safety. And by having such a structure, and there's many more out there, having such a structure, leaders experience safety. And then I say, okay, now compare this to your meetings. How safe are your meetings? And then you get a whole different perspective. Then I have leaders telling me this is not what happens in any of our meetings. We always talk over each other. I am often disconnected, not willing to participate or listen. We often openly blame. There's a lot of criticism. And what I feel here is that I can relax, that my breathing goes down, that I feel heard because no one is interrupting, and that I can also take the stick if I feel I want to say something. Yeah. So by having that embodied experience, there's so many more elements that come to psychological safety. So people need to experience that first, because some of those leaders never had a safe childhood, for instance. They never had a situation where they were growing up and they were free to speak. And there's many more structures that I use to really embody safety, and then it's a lot easier to explain. Yeah, because leaders often think that safety means that they have to put clear structures in, that they have to micromanage, that they have to give direct instructions. But that's the opposite of psychological safety. Yeah.
100%.
Psychological safety means people are themselves, they can breathe normally, they can express themselves in an authentic way without being judged, for instance, and that is felt. Yeah, that's much more an energetic experience than a
Yes.
mental one.
Absolutely. How beautifully described. You know what has happened in my experience in the organizations these days? People have forgotten what is normal, Anna.
True.
Shallow breathing has become the new normal. They don't know what
Mm,
does deep breathing mean unless
yeah,
they go
true.
to a retreat and experience that. And they feel that deep breathing only belongs to such retreats, but actually it's a pure human experience. You should be able to deep breathe every single second without being
Exactly.
afraid.
That's true. And you know what, Divya? Some people never had an intensive breath, even as a child.
Yes.
So that's what I see happening a lot because I do a lot of breathing techniques in offices, in organizations. I do a lot of emotional bodily exercises like small movements, biodynamic movements. And there's a lot of aha moments in those workshops. A lot of people say, you know, now that you noticed, now I can notice that I have a problem with my stomach, for instance. Why do I feel it now? And that's what breath does. So we should all be breathing and learn how to do
Beautiful.
it for sure.
Yes. And we should be
Yeah,
creating cultures where we let others breathe as well.
exactly. I think even in the West, we're even more impaired, Divya, to be honest, because I'm learning a lot from the Eastern cultures, to be honest. I feel that they are much closer connected to that wisdom
Yeah.
than in the West. But still, the good thing is because we are so disconnected from that,
Yeah.
whatever we start breathing, it has such an impact that I no longer have to convince people because they're like, "Whoa, what just happened?" You know. But we have a long way to go for sure. And
Yes.
I don't know what it is like in the Eastern cultures over there, but I'm sure that you can see the impact of stress as well. No.
Yes,
Mm,
very much
mm,
actually. And that's one of the
mm,
reasons I started this company, Wocult, and
mm,
that's the purpose behind it because the impact
mm,
is huge. It's gigantic, and people are not realizing why this is happening to them. They are
mm.
just sleepwalking into their careers and into their lives, is what I
Yes,
see
true.
from the outside. Yeah.
It's
Okay.
beautifully said, yeah, because there is a whole awakening process that starts when you
Yes.
become really conscious of breathing. Yeah, I
Yes,
fully
yes.
hear you in that.
Thank you. Okay, my next question to you, Anna, is MIT Sloan found that a toxic culture is the single strongest predictor of people quitting their jobs, which is
Hmm.
roughly 10 times more powerful than their compensation.
Hmm.
Yet, it never shows on the balance sheet until the people start leaving.
Hmm.
So, what is toxicity really costing an organization that they are underestimating right now?
Yes. I think the biggest cost is stagnation and extinction, to be honest. A company that doesn't give energy to its employees will by default stop to exist, for sure. Yeah. In the meantime, you have a lot of additional costs that are not measured, but that are there. So obviously attrition, because you have to let people go, hire new people. That's a big one. There's a lot of long-term illness, especially here in Europe. We have a high degree of people who are out for 3, 6 months or more. That's a huge cost, obviously. But what is more costly is that people will adopt behaviors that lead to stagnation. Yeah. As an example, a person who doesn't feel valued will not necessarily be excited to contact new clients.
Yeah.
Yes, because the stress will take over and they will be much more inclined to retract, to no longer interact with other people, and to try and take care of themselves, for instance. Yeah. Another thing is that it really stops innovation because in a culture where we are constantly blaming our employees, yeah, they will no longer explore. They will no longer feel inclined to initiate new things that might make the company grow. And I see that a lot in organizations, especially in Europe. And what I usually do there is I create like walls of shame.
Okay.
I say to leaders, okay, now we're going to build a whole wall with project that we once tried and that all failed, because that happens. But if we don't talk about it and we consistently blame people's mistakes and we call them mistakes, then nobody's going to explore anymore. They will just stick to the obvious. They will
Yes.
disconnect from the organization and your company will stagnate. And obviously, what organizations do is then look at the market. Okay, we're stagnating, so the market is not right, or our competition is stronger, and so on. It's not that. It's that the soul of the organization is gone. Yeah? And the soul is not bringing energy into the organization. And as a living system, anything that doesn't have energy will stop living. And that's what I see as the biggest cost. Now, obviously, a board member might not easily listen to that. So, what I usually do is I build specific KPIs around toxic behaviors that lead to structural outputs in an organization. Yeah. And by turning those into leading KPIs,
Yeah.
I often get the attention of the board members as well. And a typical one is employee engagement. Yeah. So I have a minimum employee engagement as a KPI for every leader. And it's measured because we have a serious problem of employee engagement in Europe. Well, it's worldwide, obviously,
Yes.
but I think Europe is very strong on the top of the of that list because when there is no soul in a company, employees will not be able to connect with something bigger than themselves. They will not have any purpose in that organization, and that's where the real costs are. Yeah, you will attract sheep who are working for a specific salary, but you will not have people driving, growing, innovating that structure. And that's scary. Now, the good thing is, this is coming in really fast in Europe. So people are waking up. Leaders
Yeah.
are waking up. They're realizing if I want to exist in the next 10 or 20 years, I need to do something fast about my culture. It's probably still money driven behind that, Divya, I have to be honest. But at
Yeah.
least they're
Yeah.
recognizing
Yeah.
those links. So I'm actually very hopeful as far as that's concerned.
That's wonderful, Anna. I'm happy to hear that at least that's being recognized there in Europe.
Hmm.
I'm just remembering a huge number right now. McKinsey
Hmm.
Health Institute actually did a study in India
Hmm.
that
Okay.
59% of people working as employees, so in service
Hmm.
sector, are burnt
Hmm.
out. 59%.
Yeah,
Just imagine that
that's
number.
huge.
And that number is actually growing. And I was just
Hmm.
also researching that, globally, there is more than 8.8 trillion dollars, which is US dollars, of
Hmm.
productivity loss that happens
Hmm.
because of anxiety and burnout.
Yeah,
So
sure.
this is the cost that the
Mm, mm.
organizations are paying,
It's
but are
huge.
not ready to see that on their P&L right now because it
Mm,
does not matter to them. At least in India,
mm.
it does not that much.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to hear the work that you are doing, Anna, in Europe.
It's the awareness is slowly growing, and often there is a money, a dollar sign or a
Yeah,
euro sign behind. I realize that, but because I think 10 years ago a company could allow itself to be toxic much longer than today,
yes,
because these younger generations, they want purpose, right?
yes, yes,
They say, okay, this doesn't feel right. I'm going to switch every year now
yeah,
because that mission, I don't feel it. So, and I find that a good thing, even though there's a lot of criticism towards the new generations, but I feel that they are much more conscious of that.
yeah,
And organization are now responding to it, but the number is huge. It's terrible. It's terrible.
absolutely.
59%. It's a
Yeah,
disaster. Let's face
yes,
it. Mm,
yes,
mm,
absolutely, absolutely.
mm,
Okay, so before the rapid fire, I have my last question to you,
mhm,
um, which is that this question is very personal to someone who may be sitting right now in a toxic workplace
mhm,
and feeling scared, second guessing
mhm,
themselves whether it's the workplace that's not right or something is wrong inside them. So,
mhm.
what's that one honest thing you'd want them to know? What's your
Yes.
message to them?
Yes. My message would be that you are empowered to change everything. If you are feeling something is off, talk about it as soon as you can with your peers, with your managers, and then with all the external instances who are responsible for well-being, because an organization is obliged to have those instances in place, whether
Yeah,
internally or externally. That's the first step. Find someone you trust, because if you are being gaslit, you're starting to question your own feelings, and you need to have sanity in that. You need to find that one person that you trust that says, okay, what you're feeling is actually right. Yeah. And it could be an external person to the company. Now, the second step is if you have done all that, if you have contacted all those instances, yeah, and there's no reply, then find another culture, because you will not be able to not feel the toxicity. Yeah. I worked in organizations before I became an independent and set up my own company that were very toxic. And I remember having done everything I could and then thought, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to fight this culture. Yeah. I realized that fighting it doesn't work. Transforming it does. So I
yes,
set up my own business and said, okay, if I can't fight that, I'm going to transform it.
yes,
Yeah. But that's a very different perspective, because I feel now I am the creator of those healthy structures. And before I was like a Jeanne d'Arc, putting in my sword and saying, okay, I'm now going to fight all the toxic leaders. That was not the way to do it. But speak up from a genuine place and find a buddy in the company that you trust to explore what's happening on the inside, and use that experience, use it to change other environments. Because if you can survive such a structure and you can heal from it, then you have so much awareness, because you've embodied those two environments.
yes,
And actually, it has made me stronger than ever. I have lost, I had lost my voice because I was in a sexual harassment case as well, that did not end well for me. So, but afterwards, I felt so much stronger to never let that happen to me or any other woman
Yeah.
in the organizations I was working for.
Yeah.
So use it as your power. We are not victims. Don't stay in that mode. Get help if you feel that you are in a victim mode, because you can easily transform that into a strength.
Thank you, Anna. That's so courageous, and I have goosebumps right now. Thank you.
Thank you. You may have experienced a similar thing,
I
Divya.
have many times actually,
Exactly.
but there have been extremely ugly experiences I've been through. So
Mm, yeah,
that's the
yeah.
reason behind Wocult. As you rightly said, fighting it
Mm,
actually does not lead you anywhere, but transforming it
mm,
does. So maybe do
exactly.
something for others with the
Yeah.
strengths that you've built in yourself.
Yes, and you also have that knowledge inside of you now because you have
Yes,
lived that experience, and it's uncomparable to anything else because you can so easily speak about it. You know what it is like. You can
yes,
help others, and that's the greatest thing. Our deepest pain, if we transform it, becomes our biggest strength. So I'm
yes.
grateful to those experiences now.
Yes, same with me. Those
Exactly.
experiences ultimately build you the person you are today.
Exactly, exactly. And get
Okay.
help if you cannot transform from it. Get help. If you feel that you're
Yeah.
suffering still, just find someone to help you out.
Yes. Yes, Anna. Okay, now my last three rapid fire questions.
Hmm. Hmm.
Number one is a billboard outside every leadership team's office. One
Yeah.
line, Anna.
One line would be people don't follow what you say, they follow what you do. So show exemplary behavior. Yeah. If you
Hmm.
say to a person, just trust me, but you don't show trust, people will not be able to trust you. Yeah. Just always show what the behavior should be, and then the rest will go automatically.
Great. One word leaders most misuse when they talk about culture.
I'm thinking out here because I was thinking about this before we came. Um, Culture is not the same as values. Yeah. Culture is the group of behaviors that you reward, that you tolerate, and that you don't accept.
Wonderful. Thank you. One regenerative practice you'd make
Hmm.
non negotiable for
Hmm.
every leadership team.
Yeah. I would definitely say talking circles. Talking circles with a stick so you ensure safety. Because that is a space where leaders can explore what psychological safety really means. And it's a very simple structure that you can set up in 20 minutes' time. It takes you only to go outside, find a stick, use an authentic one. And what I've noticed is that a lot of people, when we introduce that, they have their own sticks on their desks, even. So when a person comes up, says, "Can you take the stick now? Because it's now it's your time to talk." So use that practice. It's a really good one. It comes from the shamans, honestly,
Okay.
who had these circles with talking sticks they would hold. And then they would say, aho, when their talking was over. And then they would pass on the stick to the next person. So it's a lovely, lovely ritual.
Thank you for being on Vocult.
Yeah, likewise, Divya. I really enjoyed talking to you. And I'm really glad that we have so much to share. Plus, seeing that you are transforming that into an organization that focuses on it is really wonderful. It's a beautiful job that you are doing, and you should be really proud of yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna.